Back on the Weekly Roundup, some of your questions, comments from Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Going to be responding to them. I'm going to start off with GambyMan1, who says, "Hey John, do you watch Dexter? Because I think that's a show you guys could review now that Game of Thrones is finished." He's referring to our What the Flick weekly reviews of Game of Thrones. That's done. Mad Men is finishing up in just a couple of weeks, and so we will be looking for new shows to review. Now, unfortunately, GambyMan, I do not watch Dexter. I had a friend a couple of years ago who tried to get me to watch the pilot, and I wasn't very interested in it. Now, will they review it without me? Possibly. It is a popular show. I could see that being done. But if they do, I probably will not be personally involved. Now, some of the shows we might be covering in the near future, it's very likely that Breaking Bad will be covered. Now, I have not yet watched Breaking Bad, but I am considering watching it so I could take part in those reviews because people seem to love it. Anna Kasparian says it's her favorite show of all time. I think Steve-O also said that it was great, and so I might consider watching that. In the future, The Walking Dead, almost naturally, we're going to be covering that. And possibly Newsroom, although I don't know if that show really requires a weekly review. It's interesting, and it seems fitting for us as a network, but I don't know that it deserves a review. Moving on to Rich Crab from Freebird THB says, "Have you ever played or heard of DayZ, the mod for Arma 2? Now, he was saying this in response to a tweet I put out yesterday about what weapon you would use against a zombie or something like that. And I responded to him there, but I'm also going to respond here. Yes, I have heard of and played the DayZ mod. Not really into it. It seemed like something I would be super into because I like survival horror, I like zombies and all of that. But for me, at least, DayZ was just way too buggy. The movement of the zombies was way too wacky. And eventually, you had the influx of hackers and things like that. And it made, for me, that the game just didn't work. I also played the War Z. That game had a bunch of problems. And so for now, it looks like I'm going to have to wait for a good zombie experience. I do intend to play State of Decay on Xbox Live Arcade once I actually get my Xbox hooked up again. And The Last of Us seems really interesting, although unfortunately I don't have a PS3. Otherwise, I would have already played that. Moving on, Ensign Paul says, "Can I have one new Superman movie without the blatant Jesus imagery? Hashtag Man of Steel." I have not seen Man of Steel, but I have heard from many reviewers, including What the Flick, that the Jesus imagery is ladled on pretty thickly on this one. Now, I don't really fault them, because I understand that there are some obvious similarities between the story of Superman and of Jesus, but the problem is when you had multiple reboots over time, and you keep playing it up in every one of them, it's not going to have as much strength the fifth time around. But I will say, while I have not seen the movie, the Jesus imagery isn't really what's stopping me from watching it. I just don't really find Superman to be a particularly interesting character. I mean, he has almost no weaknesses whatsoever. I mean, I guess his desire to not kill anyone personally, although apparently he breaks that, spoiler alert. And the kryptonite, yeah, I get that, that's a weakness, but I just don't find it interesting. I find characters like Batman, Spider-Man to some extent, just much more engaging. Finally, Mikandrinri says, "John, what kind of bikes did you have?" Referring to some of the comments last week about anti-scooter hate and the fact that I had a scooter. So presently, I ride a Yamaha Vino 125, which is sort of middle-sized scooter. That's my main commuting vehicle, and I love it. I've had a number of motorcycles over the years. I started off with a Kawasaki EX250, which is the small Ninja, so a sport bike. I had a Honda Shadow 600 VLX, a Ducati 620 IE, the monster naked bike. Most recently, the last motorcycle I owned was a Harley-Davidson 883, the smaller Sportster. I don't think it was an R. I think it was just the 883. I also owned one other scooter, which turned out to be a Lemon. It was some cheap Chinese crap, unfortunately. And so I've owned all of these, and I have to say that while it's much slower than my Ninja, it's much less cool looking and sounds much less intimidating than my Sportster. It's just super convenient, and I love it. I think it looks good. It's easy to get around on. It's extremely cheap. I just insured it for a year for $120. It gets over 60 to 70 miles per gallon. And I've lived in LA for a year and a half with just that. And so while I understand a lot of people hate scooters and love to hate on scooters, I currently love it. Happy with my Vino 125. I intend to supplement it with a car soon. But for now, when it comes to two wheels, that's all I need. So anyway, those are the 4 comments I wanted to focus on. Losing my voice here, gonna have to wrap it up. If you have comments or questions that you'd like to see featured on a future edition of the Weekly Roundup, feel free to submit them. How can you do that? Well, you can leave a comment on this video, on the discussion thread of the channel. You can tweet me at John Iadarola, and also you can go to Facebook. I have a fan page that somebody set up. I also check that every once in a while, so feel free to leave comments there, and I'll see you next week.